Next season is still a few months away, but I thought it would be worth talking about some expectations for players and what I want to see from some of Winnipeg's top stars and some of their depth players. Find out who I want more from on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, like I said, we're going to be focusing on a bit of a series that we're going to be starting where I'm talking about players and what I hope and look forward to from their performances next season. Some of this is a little bit of a mixture of prediction, expectation, and also what I would like to see from them, right? We want to talk about guys, whether they need to improve, whether they're really delivering the goods, or guys who perhaps just haven't really met expectations for what the Jets need from them. We'll dive into all of that, starting off with Mark Scheifele in just a quick moment. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to let you know that tonight's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Now, like I said, the Jets have, any number of top-end players, although, arguably the Jets only have a few, superstar guys, and it's probably not as much up front as it is elsewhere on the team. All that said, Winnipeg does have some really, really, really good forwards, and one of them is Mark Scheifele. Now, I know Scheifele over the years has kind of been, up and down in terms of his scoring rates and stuff. I would say that, for the most part, you generally get a fairly consistent performance from him. He's been around a point per game for a good portion of his career. Sometimes he'll be a little bit over that, sometimes a bit under that. Last year was one of the first years where he, in some time, was really off the pace, despite scoring a career-high 42 goals. But in terms of his overall points totals, he took a significant step back compared to where he usually finishes the season. This is a guy who usually gets around a point per game, sometimes more if we're fortunate. And for the first time in a couple of years, there was kind of a 2-year stretch between 2022 and 2023 where he was a good 10 to 15 points behind his usual pace. So you were sort of wondering where he would finish this season, but this year he was kind of back to where he was in previous seasons. I would say that for Scheifele, I think he'll continue to be around a point per game player. That's typically been his career rate. I think he's going to do it again, and I think that's pretty nice. Where I've sort of wanted more from Scheifele has really been in the two-way side of things. And it's been a pretty consistent thing over the last few years that the defensive side of his game has really sort of fallen off. And that's not to say that he doesn't backtrack or effectively man mark from time to time, but I really feel like his game in general has changed to be really offensively focused, where the other side of his game as a top line center has sort of fallen off. And I don't think he really needs to focus on the defensive work so much. I just thought it would be nice if it would improve a bit. There are times where he just doesn't really make those reads, or he doesn't back check as aggressively, or he doesn't cut down those passing and shooting lanes. And I feel like given his role and responsibility, you'd probably ask for a bit more there. But I mean, that's not to say that it's been as bad as it was in previous seasons, but it is kind of noticeable that his performance has sort of deviated a little bit from his typical expectations. This is a guy who, is supposed to be one of Winnipeg's real big breadwinners, and I think he's generally been that. But, this season, it'd be fun if he could put together a really top-end elite season back to where we saw him really competing for the likes of Team North America as one of their top centers and shutdown centers. Obviously, that team was super deep, so Scheifele was a little bit further down the depth chart, but there were years where he kind of looked like he'd be fighting for some of the top awards in the NHL. Obviously, he's never going to be a McDavid level threat or a Bergeron defensively. But you know what he is just really friggin' good at what he does. And sometimes I think that gets a little bit lost in the conversation because there's been times where you've had some real harsh criticism for his play. And I think, the past few years where he sort of felt disengaged and looked visibly like he just did not appreciate where the Jets were going and what they were doing, you sort of wondered what his overall commitment to Winnipeg was. But he reaffirmed it this offseason. He had a very strong season this year. He had, 72 points in 74 games, which is no slouch. And I think a lot of people were generally happy with his performance. Aside from like defensive work, I keep hoping for him that at some point he has this mega season where he hits like 90 to 100 points. I feel like he has the skill to get there. It's just for one reason or another, his points totals have generally been a little bit more modest. Maybe he doesn't have like the top end elite finishing and speed of a McKinnon, but he's still like a really versatile elite attacking presence. And I feel like at some point the dam has to break because the dude creates loads of chances. He's generally in the right areas. And I think if the power play stops sucking so much, that's where he'll derive even more value. Not that I think, power play points are the most important thing, but when it comes to like elite finishing on the power play, you look back at when Scheifele was really at his best several years ago, and the dude was just ripping them from the slot area. That was like his best place to be. He was a monster there. And over the years, I feel like it's sort of waffled a bit. And he does still finish quite a few opportunities on the power play, but generally speaking, I feel like his effectiveness there has sort of waned. He plays a lot on the half wall, and I don't know that that's really the best place for him. It feels like he delays with the puck too long, and so that's something where if he speeds that timing up and he's able to get back towards the middle of the slot area where I really feel like he's most dangerous, the power play will really feed off of that. And with the chemistry that he exhibits at times with Gabriel Vilardi, I feel like him moving down the middle would actually be really helpful. I think it would help the power play really explode. It would give Vilardi even more space to work with because Scheifele will naturally draw a lot of attention. And I think you'll see, both of their points totals really climb if you make that switch. Otherwise, from Scheifele, I think just more of the same from him going forward. Continue to be a productive passer, a good shooter, and a real, top six offensive threat. That's all you really need to ask from him. I think this coming year he'll have probably between 85 and 90 points. I think he'll get close to that, depending on how Arniel wants to run the top line. There is one thing that could threaten that, and really it's the one thing that, other than his defensive game, you'd probably ask is that he gets away from Kyle Connor. I know that he likes playing with him, and I think he's probably shown that multiple times, but I think at this point, you've got to make that relationship split. I know that they seem that, or at least seemingly think they work together, and it just doesn't really go the way it appears in a lot of ways. And so I think the Jets need to make that switch, and I think Scheifele needs to acknowledge that it just doesn't work the way that he wants it to, and it's probably time to try some new look lines. When he was playing with Ehlers and Vilardi, it was sensational. You could almost describe the experience as life-changing. And so if he can get back to that, and if he actually play on that line more consistently, I really do think that we're going to see a new level of play from Mark that we haven't seen in many years. It's clear he's still got the skill and he's still got some real gas. It's just figuring out the best way to tease it out. So some food for thought there, but obviously, I just talked about Kyle Connor, and I want to talk about expectations for him because there's two versions of him that I think we could see next year. And one of them I would prefer, even if it's still not, the best version of Kyle Connor that one could ask for. But we'll talk about that in just a quick moment. Before we go too much further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Game Time. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of you know that, purchasing tickets these days is a real hassle. There's plenty of hidden charges, surprise fees. Sometimes when you're buying tickets, you're actually just buying them blind. You're not sure where you're actually sitting, and you just have to rely on a seat map that doesn't really give you an idea of the view. Game Time is here to help. They totally get it. They've been there before, and that's why they want to offer you, killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and even views from your seat when available. They want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, and it's why they've become an official marketplace of the NBA. They're even offering excellent NBA Finals tickets that you can get even faster and easier. And the best part is that prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to tip-off. If you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, go with Game Time. They offer event cancellation protection, their lowest price guarantee, and so much more. You even get flash sales and zone deals when available. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for joining us on tonight's episode as we are chatting about some stuff where, listen, the Jets are perhaps setting up expectations for next season. I have a few things that I would like to see from some of Winnipeg's top players, whether they're veterans or even young stars. I think for Winnipeg, though, we're expecting some big things from a couple of players who we're hoping really carry the mantle and elevate their games to a level we haven't perhaps seen in some time. And with Arniel maybe promising a more intriguing direction for the team, this might be the year where we see some really big seasons from some of our existing guys like Mark Scheifele and in particular Kyle Connor. I want to talk about Kyle Connor and what I want to see from him this upcoming season in just a moment. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to talk to you, for those of you who are Fox Sports or ESPN watchers, if you find yourself having to turn down the volume because there's too much shouting, make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you daily to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, thanks again for rejoining us. Like I said, Kyle Connor, I want a big year from him. For what it's worth, I enjoy when Kyle Connor is scoring. The problem with Kyle is that when he's not scoring, his game has tended to, it's been a little bit one-dimensional, if we're being honest. I think this past season, for the bit that he played, it was very interesting because during the regular season, there was legit reason to be frustrated with his play, especially in the second half post-injury. He just wasn't the same guy. You notice that he shied away even more from contact in the corners. It felt like he would sort of back off of pressure on numerous occasions, and that really had a noticeable impact in my mind on his participation in play. Now, let's listen, make no mistake, he's never been a real defensive presence, and it's one of the biggest criticisms of his game is that he just doesn't really actively man mark or do any sort of zonal marking other than sort of what appears to be the bare minimum. That's whatever. At this point, you could probably write a column on Kyle Connor's defensive impact. We sort of get it, right? What I thought was kind of bad, though, was that change in the shift in his performance where he stopped applying he applied even less pressure to puck carriers than he did previously. And when he had opportunities to win second chance pucks, he wasn't always going after it, which is kind of unusual for him. He doesn't really have that problem in a lot of ways. This is a guy who's like an opportunistic poacher, and when he sees that chance, he will take it. So for him to back off and really shy away even more and really be ineffective for long stretches of the year was pretty unusual to see. And you look at his score sheet this year and you're like, really? 61 points in 64 games? He wasn't effective? Yeah, unfortunately, it was not quite a year that I think he would really love. Now, where I noticed it start to change was when we got to the playoffs. And really part of the end of the season, he had more engagement and started really pushing the pace. And there were times where he was throwing body checks and doing stuff that we have never seen from him before. He was engaged. He was really applying pressure along the walls. And there was a different version of Kyle Connor who, even when he wasn't scoring, I thought was just overall more effective. There were even some games this past year that I would describe as some of his best overall and most complete games that we've seen in years. And that's not to say that he was putting up like the best results ever of his career, but he had a more well-rounded approach, and that's the version of Kyle Connor I want to see. In fact, I would actually give up some of like the goals and stuff that he scores if he just played a more well-rounded and complete game, because to me there's clearly the talent and skill to still naturally produce loads of points. The guy is good at it. He was born to score when he gets on those one-on-one situations. And so I don't really have any concern or questions about his ability to do that. What I want to see from him is the ability to really grow his game into something more than what we've seen in previous years. Kyle is a guy who gets prime minutes on this team. He is given a prime starring role, and you just need a bit more from him because, for as much as he puts on his own shoulders and how he wants to create, there's, a version of his play that I think can really be elevated to an even higher level. And it's crazy to say that about a guy who, just a few years ago scored 47 goals. But I just think the Jets need that extra bit of juice from him. If he even participates 50% in the plays compared to what he used to do, that would be a massive improvement. And I think the Jets would be thrilled with that level of engagement. You'd see more backtracking. You'd see more physical play from him. He'd probably throw a few extra body checks, maybe get the interior positioning, fight for a few more turnovers, and I think it would actually lead to him scoring more. The dude is super fast, so as soon as he gets that puck off of somebody else's stick, he's gone. The guy's just made of lightning in his skates. And so for me, this coming season, I think he'll still do what he usually does, which is probably have a top scoring year for Winnipeg's roster. I don't know that he's ever going to get to the 2022 year where he had 93 points. I don't know if he'll get to that. It would also depend on where he plays on the team. I would like to see him really play with Perfetti. I think those two had a really good understanding, and Perfetti does a great job of sort of balancing out some of Kyle Connor's weaknesses, where Connor then gets to sort of roam and be a more versatile offensive threat. And Perfetti's a great passer where I think if you play them together enough, Cole's going to find him for a lot of chances. I think you can get some real natural chemistry out of that. I think that there's a real chance that that duo together could be really dangerous. And so for me, I would be very fascinated to see them on a line together again. It also means that you could probably run Ehlers, Scheifele, and Vilardi on the top line, back to what we had last year. I think that trio is dynamite. I think if you have a Connor, probably a Nemesnikov or something, and Perfetti, I think you'd have a really, really good second line that's very well balanced, because you've got the forechecking and skill of Nemesnikov, who surprisingly scored at a pretty similar rate earlier in the season to what Monahan had throughout much of his Habs time. You've got Connor, who's a great and gifted finisher, and you've got Perfetti, who can be a stabilizing force and also just a great distributor. So I'm expecting a big year from Connor. I think he's got real aspirations to have a top scoring season again. I know last year probably to some degree pissed him off because, compared to what he was doing in previous seasons, it wasn't like his pace was necessarily off, but I think his overall concern about his physical state and sort of getting injured again kept him from being as much of a threat as I think he wanted to be. So, this year, hoping for big things from him, would like to see him go back to that really aggressive physical style that he had. I don't want him to throw himself at every single shift, but a little more engagement. Like I said, 50% would be awesome. Clearly, the Jets love him. He's going to be a guy who's probably going to be here for a long time to come. And so with that being the case, you just want him to be at his absolute best and really giving you 100% on every single shift. But, maybe he'll shock us and have a season where he goes over 80 points again. He hasn't done it in a good couple of seasons, and he's only done it once in his career. But if he does it again, that would be fantastic. I enjoy watching him score. I think it'd be nice to have him getting into that 85 plus point territory. We don't have many players who are capable of that. Connor is genuinely one of the few that can pull it off. So hoping for a big year from him. We'll see what he does. And we'll just have to keep an eye on his overall game and whether or not he kind of goes back to what we saw in the postseason. But Of course, I've been kind of tossing around some other guys in the top 6. One name in particular that I want to focus on in just a moment is Gabriel Vilardi, and what I think we could see from him in what I would consider to be the best piece from that Dubois trade. We'll talk about Vilardi's upcoming year in just a moment. Before we go too much further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Policygenius. Life is unpredictable, and sometimes you find yourself in trouble. You just know, all you have to do is look at my arm and see that I've been in some mosh pits and I've gotten hurt. But, sometimes it gets worse, right? You have a serious car accident, maybe a really serious work incident. You can't always prepare for it, but you want to make sure that your family is protected and has, all the coverage that they need to get through some of life's biggest burdens, especially a serious life-altering event. And that's why life insurance is really important. Policygenius is the country's leading online marketplace for insurance. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. I think for a lot of you, getting through the process of sorting through insurance language and stuff, it's a lot of jargon. It can be hard to figure it out, and sometimes you're not even sure what plan you're applying for, and that's why Policygenius is here to help. Their experts walk you step by step through the process. They'll help you compare quotes, and you know what? Getting covered is actually a lot easier than you think. They'll help you find the best value insurance for what you need and make sure that you are covered to the exact degree that you want to be. Policygenius has no incentive to recommend one insurer over another, so you can always trust their guidance. Get peace of mind by finding the right life insurance with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just talking about a couple of big performances that I'm hoping for some of Winnipeg's top players. And you know what? One of the things that I would really like to see from Winnipeg is a big season from Gabriel Vilardi. I honestly think Vilardi is genuinely one of Winnipeg's really unheralded stars. I think he's going to have a big year this coming season, and he had a pretty good approach this past year. I think there were some moments where he was like legitimately looking to be a top line winger. Obviously him as a center, perhaps not as prolific, but it feels like he is on the cusp of really becoming a pivotal part of the Jets future. And I think for Winnipeg, what I want from him is to really see that return to dominance that he had alongside Ehlers and Scheifele. And I think with, that particular trio, the way that those three play together is just magical. I love it. It's very enjoyable. And I think if Vilardi can start to hit the heights that he did with that particular trio, you could see some crazy stuff in this upcoming season. Vilardi in particular, I think, has a chance to really become like a 70 or 80 point player. I think he got pretty close in some times with the Kings, but I think with the Jets, I think it's an even better fit for his offensive style, which I don't want to say that he plays like Wheeler, but he has moments where he looks a little bit similar to the way that Blake used to play. I think that you're looking for a guy who could, be on pace for like 70-ish to 80 points this coming season. I think especially with that consistency and like a healthy year, he could do that, right? Like his Kings points totals, you'll look at him and you'll say, yeah, they were okay. He had one year where he was like maybe 2/3 of a point per game. But remember, the Kings also didn't play the most up-tempo style that I think would really suit him. The Jets, I think, could get even more out of him. He honestly almost had his similar points total from that season in like 20 less games with the Jets. So I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, especially as his role continues to grow. He didn't even have like top line minutes for the Jets this year, and even still had a pretty impressive season for as abbreviated as it was. If he stays healthy, I think this year you could see between like 65 and 70 points. I'd like to be a little more bullish on it just because I feel like with a full season, he's going to be a beast. He's very strong in transition. In the offensive zone, he's got a great center of gravity, and I think it tends to allow him to be a really versatile scoring platform. His role on the power play really started to expand late in the season. And if that continues to grow, you might start looking again at that 80-point sort of season, especially if he continues to chug along on the top line. I think he's got some really good chemistry with Scheifele and Ehlers. I think if he plays with the smart, intelligent players, you'll see his own intelligence stick out. One thing that he kind of does that's really cool is that he gets lost in coverages. I feel like there were moments, sort of like Laine used to do, where somehow the big, tall, physical center or winger just sort of got lost in the whole conversation. I don't know how Laine used to do it, because Patrick's shot was one of the scariest things, and yet there were moments where he was just unmarked and uncovered, and I guess people just weren't paying attention to him, or they were sort of cheating and not marking him as closely. And I think Vilardi has the same ability to sort of get lost in those defensive coverages. If he gets more open and starts to really use that shot of his, he could have a fantastic season. So I think if I'm asking for one thing for Vilardi, and this is not something that he can necessarily control, but really it's just asking the hockey gods, I guess, it's to have a healthy season. The dude hasn't really had one of those in some time, and it's really kept him from becoming a truly elite household name. I think he's got all the skill and talent to be fantastic, and there's clearly a great player there that's just waiting to be brought to the surface with a full season, but we've seen flashes. I think that there's tons of potential there. I think he's got loads of skill and ability that we're starting to get, more and more flashes of. And I think if he continues on his current trajectory, like it seems like he's on the path to do, he might be one of Winnipeg's best trade acquisitions in some time. I really feel like, he was the best player in that Dubois trade, and I continue to stick by that. I think his scoring rates are going to improve. I think his own performance is going to improve. I think at the end of next season, he's going to have had a really big year. Maybe he doesn't hit the crazy numbers that I would love to see from him, but I think he's going to have a really strong season all the same. And it'll be fun to, kind of get him locked up long-term should he have a good season and stay healthy. I enjoy watching him. I think he's a great player. I've always been a fan of him since he was a prospect. I never thought that he'd actually be able to make the pros with some of the horrible injury luck that he's had over the years, but it seems like he's finally starting to settle in. He's getting a real role for himself, and I just hope that he gets the chance to really show teams and opponents what he's made of. I feel like he has a big chip on his shoulder. I think he wants to sort of, give the Kings the finger and show them what they're missing out on, and show them that they were mistaken for choosing Dubois over him. I think that is very much the case. I think he's the better player, and it didn't really take long for me to have that opinion. I just happened to see him the first few games, and I'm like, yep, that dude's better. I just feel like he's going to be, a really dynamic force for the Jets this year, and all I can ask for is a healthy stint, because we've already seen in 47 games, he had 36 points, right? You prorate that, just under 70 points for the whole year. So if he has the full season, I am excited to see what he can really do, especially as he continues to get some chemistry with his line mates and on that power play. Dude, he was so good on the power play, man. Once they started to figure out that you should park him below the goal line and let him wrap around and stuff, he was dicing opponents up. He had 9 power play goals last year, 14 points overall. And I just have to imagine that if you want one piece on this team to really fix your man advantage and make the most of chaos down low, it has got to be Gabriel Vilardi. That dude was born to score on the power play. But I'm curious to know what you think of these 3 players. Who are you expecting big seasons from? Do you think Scheifele will get back to some of his heights that he had before, the last few years settled in? Do you think Connor's able to grow his game to become a really fun attacking forward who actually backchecks once in a while? Do you think this is going to be Vilardi's year? Are you expecting him to stay healthy? Do you think he's finally going to have a season to really relish and remember? Drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for even more Jets coverage, so see you around, have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.